I'm sure you hear this all the time. It's something that I find personally very, very frustrating. This idea that Superman is no longer relevant in modern society, that times have passed him by, what he represents is no longer in vogue. It shouldn't even be presented out there. And that's why we don't get like really great Superman comic books anymore. He's too hard and he's so irrelevant that nobody wants as the most important comic book superhero of all time, which he absolutely is.
Yeah, of course. And it's really annoying when you have writers saying it, like Jason Aaron, who's like, I'm going to take over Absolute Superman. We're going to make him relevant because he's not relevant anymore. It's like, that's not the truth at all. This character is always relevant. Doing the right thing is always relevant, which is what he represents. Truth, justice, in the American way, not a better tomorrow, which... But anyways, that's doing the right thing is always relevant. I don't understand how you could ever say that Superman is irrelevant to the current times. He will always be. And he's a great character that there's always use for him. You just got to have a talented writer to do it. He's not the easiest character to write, of course, but if you have the talent, you can do it. We just saw it with a World Saga. That was amazing.
Absolutely. And there's a reason that he was introduced in like the late 30s?
Yep,
and
1938.
He's still around today. You know, he's still an important character and he's evergreen. It's because there's so much cool stuff in there to unpack. All you need is the right person that actually likes a Superman character. Unfortunately, we don't get that all the time, but I am so tired of the naysayers. Of course, the one thing they love to say is, you know, he's too perfect and it makes him unrelatable. Superman, first of all, he's not perfect, but he's pretty darn close to it, but that doesn't make him unrelatable. It makes him somebody that you should aspire to try to be.
Exactly. Yeah, he's an aspirational character, and there are also always relevant moments of things that you can relate to with Superman. Especially that was part of adding John Kent in there. Was that added another wrinkle to him when he was first added in a situation where it's like, oh, now Superman has something else to care about, something else he has to worry about, and something where a lot of people could relate to. And you just got to have the talent to explore those stories. Tomasi was doing that every 2 weeks in Superman Rebirth, where he was doing essentially one shots every week. It wasn't really like 6-part stories, and you were getting great stories every week. It was like, wow, this guy can mine the character unlike other people.
Is there something about, you know, your generation, because you are a lot younger than me and maybe a lot of us older comic book readers, like, is there something about that generation that has a problem with heroes that you should want to be like, instead of like, it feels like they're always trying to drag the heroes down to them?
Yeah, and especially I don't understand it because, especially like when I was growing up, Batman was the more untouchable character than Superman. Like, Batman did everything right. It was like Bat God. He was doing everything perfect. Like, he was untouchable. And Superman was the one always getting beat up and everything. So I didn't understand that perspective. But yeah, you would always get the like, Superman's too perfect. He does everything right. And he's invulnerable, so you can't ever hurt him. So it's like, what's the point? And I don't get that. I think it's just from a lot of people that have never actually read anything from the character. Maybe they've seen like a movie or watched a cartoon, and that's where they get the perspective. But I think a lot of people, if they just read some of the good comics, they would come around to the character.
And I'm fully on the team that Superman being aspirational is why he's more important today than ever. I think there's a lot of people out there, certainly young men, that don't have those really awesome, strong role models to pattern themselves after or learn from or to look up to, those kind of mentors that you have in your life. And you can turn to a character like Superman within comic books and certainly other mediums out there. I think Superman the movie really got him right the very first time. And you can kind of learn some things from that character. So just as an additional thing for people to go in there and learn from, it feels like it's more important today because more people need it today than ever.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And like one of my favorite parts about Superman is it's the whole like absolute power corrupts absolutely, except for with Superman, because he was raised right. And I think that's so interesting because it all comes back to John and Martha Kent. And we've had all those stories about what if he landed somewhere else and how he turned out, but he didn't. He landed in Kansas. He landed with them. And I think that's really interesting to see how he goes from there with being raised by the kindly couple from Kansas, and it turns him into who he is. And I love that. I think it can show like what the great character he is and someone to aspire to be.
And then another claim that's always out there is like the world has outgrown heroes like Superman because the world itself has become so cynical, as if we've all been tainted to such a degree that we couldn't even believe that there could be somebody good out there.
that's where I think that's where Superman can turn that around. But I just feel like he hasn't gotten his shot in the modern age, because if you look at everything with DC, it's always just Batman, Batman, Batman. Like when they announced their Elseworlds initiative, and then they're like, here's these Elseworlds book, and it was like 8 out of 10 are Batman. It's like they don't even give Superman a shot. They don't promote him. Everything's Batman. To where I feel like if they gave him more of a push, then potentially he could find that audience that is out there. Because I think there are people that are clamoring for a character like Superman. Just no one really knows it until you're exposed to it.
Yeah, because if you look at some of the things that have really worked, even in like movies or whatever, I think the signaling of Top Gun Maverick doing as well as it did kind of signals out there that the audience is yearning for this. They want to put behind them the cynicism of the last 20, 25 years and return to where heroes are awesome. They're people to look up to. You know, Captain America is one of the best things about the MCU. That was not a messed up version of Captain America where he'd been brought down to our level and was totally cynical. He was the Captain America that was introduced, in the 40s. And I think people would absolutely embrace that kind of Superman again.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's a good point about MCU Cap. He's a lot of people's favorite character from the MCU, and he was Cap. He's very similar to Superman, and everyone loved him. And I feel like if you get that right for Superman, you would have a character that a lot of people would enjoy and people would get into. And I'm even seeing it more right now with some of the stuff James Gunn's doing. I'm seeing on Twitter some people getting more into Superman, which is cool. And hopefully the movie's good and it accomplishes that. I just think a lot of people are misinformed about Superman. I think a lot of people think he's just some invulnerable guy that like sits out there like that, has everything bounce off his chest, and then just takes care of business in like 2 pages, and that's it. People don't understand what a complex character he is, or the fact that with a character like this, a lot of people go the cheap route of how do you make it interesting? You take away his powers, and that's the only way. Instead of elevating the character's villains and making them more powerful, a lot of people try to bring Superman down. It's like, well, then you just got another run-of-the-mill character. He's not Superman.
Yeah, he does have a bit of a villain's problem because they haven't really introduced a super powerhouse type villain that could compete with him physically, like since Doomsday. And Doomsday is amazing, but there's only so many times that Doomsday can be resurrected and try to kill Superman again. And a lot of times it's Kryptonite, it's Lex Luthor turning the public against him. And I think those stories all have a place in Superman. I do wish they could come up with a new villain, or, maybe even a group of villains that could finally challenge Superman physically and maybe beat him up like we see in that movie trailer.
So I partially agree with that in terms of we haven't gotten really any new good villains, but I think that's a comics-wide problem, not just a Superman problem, because if you look at like every character, it's like it's all the rotating cast. The only like new villain that's really hit is like Null. That's the only one I can think of where it's like that's really taken off.
Court of Owls, maybe?
Yeah, Court of Owls. Yeah, you could say them a little, but they also like took off for one story and then have just been dog shit since. So there's their introduction was good, but other than that, yeah, no other character. But because there are certainly a bunch of characters that can physically challenge Superman, just they've been around forever. So it's the same rotating cast. You're constantly getting Metallo, Zod, Brainiac, like you're constantly getting these. But yeah, I think that's just a problem with comics in general, where getting the new characters over is hard. We had that one guy that in Jeff Johns' New 52 run that was actually pretty cool, but I don't think he showed up since. The guy, I can't remember his name because it's been forever since I read it, but that was really good. The guy with long blonde hair during when John Romita Jr. was on. That guy was a good physical presence for Superman to fight. But yeah, we haven't really gotten any new villains that have stayed around. But there are certainly those people that can challenge him, just they've been around a while.
Another big claim out there, and I can kind of get this one. I can see where they're coming from. The Batman is cooler. Superman is kind of boring. There's no doubt that Batman is cool. He's a darker character. He's got more of an edge. His origin story is certainly more hard-hitting. And you're just allowed to do a lot more kind of edgy type stuff with a Batman character because he isn't powered up. He's not the aspirational hero that his Superman is. He's more of an anti-hero type of guy, vigilante out there for justice. But Superman isn't boring, and Superman is certainly cool. But Batman's also cool.
They're both great characters. There's a reason they've stuck around both since the 30s. They're both very cool characters. And I get the whole, like, Batman's darker and cooler, but I wouldn't say his origin's more hard-hitting than having your entire planet explode, being raised by a different species and having to grow up that way. Like every time they do, especially like Secret Origin, one of the best moments from the Man of Steel movie that they adopted from Secret Origin is the part where he's like, I don't want to be like some alien. I want to be your son. Then John Kent's like, you are my son. It's like, oh, Oh, that's such a good moment. And so just tears to your eyes. Like, I love that. And I think he's got a great origin. And I love, I just, again, I think it's the problem is that people haven't given it a shot. Also, for some reason, Birthright is the one people go through. I think Birthright is the worst of the top Superman origins. Everyone points to Birthright. Oh man, I don't. Okay, I think Secret Origin's much better. I think that's the one people should point to when it's like, what Superman origin should I read? Secret Origin, great. Each issue tackles a different part of Superman's life. Love it.
Man and Superman is another great place.
Man, Superman's great. Yeah, really good. And that was the fact that almost didn't get published makes me so mad too.
Exactly, they were sitting on it for like a decade.
Yeah,
That was put it out. But I do think this Batman is cooler, Superman boring type of thing is not really based in the reality of the characters or their history. I think it's based in the fact that writers don't want to write Superman because they think he's too difficult. And it's so much easier to do a Batman story where there's a bad guy, he's corrupt, I can hang him from a rooftop, I can do something pretty crazy, I can murder a bunch of people in a Batman comic book. You're probably not going to be able to get away with that in Superman because he is so strong, he's got the hearing and everything. So it is much more difficult to challenge Superman or come up with a scenario that Superman couldn't stop it literally the moment it started. So I think it's writers not really coming up and accepting the challenge when it comes to Superman.
Right, he's definitely a more difficult character, right? There's some characters that are easier. There's like some characters, like if you look at Daredevil, he's had so many great runs because I feel like he's one of those easier characters to write. But Superman's one of those guys where it's really hard. It's difficult. But if you have the talent, you can do it. We've seen it. There's so many people that have written great Superman runs, but he's hard. He's much harder than Batman. But you can do it. It's possible. It's just not an easy task, and you're not going to get as much praise for it because he's not as popular as a character as like Batman or Spider-Man.
Yeah, you think of like that Action Comics run. I think you've already mentioned it. Warworld Saga from Philip Kennedy Johnson. He basically takes the ashes of what was not a good series, Superman and the Authority, from Grant Morrison. He ends up on Warworld, and his powers are removed because he's on a planet with like a red core or something like that. So he's brought down, and then you're able to illustrate that he's not a superhero because of his cape and his powers as a Kryptonian. He's a superhero because of who Clark Kent is. And then when you see over time the way that the other people that are, what are they, the Warzoons that are marooned on the planet that are being used, they all start seeing Superman's symbol as a symbol of hope and freedom and
after they knew nothing but violence and slavery. Yeah.
That was really cool. And it was a really great way, to do a kind of a kryptonite thing, but really to put him in an unwinnable situation and show that the spirit of Clark Kent is really where that heroic nature lies. But nobody else has really picked up the baton quite like that since it.
Yeah, no one has. And what was so incredible about that was also we came off years of just horrifically bad Superman stories. Just nothing good. No light at the end of the tunnel. You had Bendis. It was awful. And then you had Grant Morrison, who's like, hey, Grant Morrison, All-Star Superman. He's done some great stuff. Did one of his worst stories I've ever read. That was terrible. Superman and the Authority was awful. And then he took that and turned it into a very interesting arc that was really good. That the only complaint I could say is maybe went on like an issue or two too long. That's it. But other than that, it was really good. And we haven't had really anything that great since, which is sad because they kicked Philip Kennedy Johnson off. And he'll be coming back though. I'm excited for his new book. But yeah, Joshua Williamson and Mark Waid, and then the Superstars Initiative. Superstars.
Yeah. I think some people perceive Superman for being boring because they just haven't had the writers that are willing to take the time and do something cool like Philip Kennedy Johnson did.
Yeah.
Personally.
I agree. I feel Jeff Johns had an amazing run on the character. I loved everything he did with Superman. It was really good. Philip Kennedy Johnson did great. Rebirth was in a fantastic era because we had Action Comics where if you want your 6-issue arcs, if you want your stories written for trade, you had Action Comics with Dan Jurgens. If you wanted more single issue stories, then you had Patrick Gleason and Tomasi on there. Yeah. And it was great. And it was like these two different style stories, but both were great and they worked well. And that was such a good era. And then that got killed for Bendis.
Yeah. Another thing you hear, that Superman is just a symbol of outdated Americana. Like he's past his sell-by date, which is something they also say about Captain America, which I outright reject. But every time somebody wants to say this, and then they grab the character like, well, Superman's no longer American. He's going to renounce his citizenship. He's not going to stand for truth, justice, in the American way. It's going to be a better tomorrow. And every time they try to strip those outdated thoughts or ideas of Americana away from Superman, everyone gets mad about it, and it makes him a lesser character.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense because people think when True Justice the American Way means he only represents Americans. But no, the American Way is something that can be taken in globally. An ideal. Yeah, it's something to strive for. It's also something where people think that the American Way means whatever regime is in office, that's what he represents. It's not the case. It doesn't matter who's in office. That's not what Superman represents. Superman represents the ideals and what America should be, what the founding fathers had intended for originally. Like that's what Superman represents, not necessarily what it is. But people, for some reason, have a hard time grasping that and just think, oh no, that this means Superman hates everyone else that's not American. He only represents who's in office, and that's what Superman is. And it's stupid.
I blame Frank Miller.
That definitely had a big part of it. That was why when he renounced his citizenship, I wasn't super mad about it, because at the time everyone's like, Superman's just a government stooge, do whatever the government tells him. So that point where he's talking to them and he's like, hey, I'm not even going to do this. I was like, okay, this at least gets that part out of the way, because a lot of people were constantly parroting that because of Frank Miller.
Yeah, they didn't read a Superman book. They read a Frank Miller Dark Knight book, and they thought that was actually Superman, even though it's not even in the real universe. That
did so much damage to the character of Superman for decades. It's sad.
And, I do think the creators of Superman, Siegel and Schuster, they wanted that to be part of who the character was. There's a reason he's always got the American flag early on. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having a hero in the DC universe, much like Captain America representing American ideals in the Marvel universe. There's a place for that stuff. And I don't think it's outdated, and he could only just be a symbol of that. But I don't mind that stuff at all. And I think a lot of people actually appreciate that Superman is actually out there trying to speak to the virtues of American ideals, even if we don't always achieve them.
Definitely. I did a whole video on the Truth, Justice, the American Way, and what the American Way means to Superman, and in it I included a clip from Jerry Siegel talking about it, because I believe it first came in like the Superman radio show, and then Jerry Siegel adopted it, and he was like, I really like this. He's like, this fits the character, and I include a clip in there where he talked about why it works and why it's an important part of the character. And then since then, it's just been thrown to the wind. It's like, no, it's a better tomorrow, and the better tomorrow is so lame. That's such a horrible replacement for it. That's such like a corporate PR, like HR type thing, where it's like, we got to do.
What can we say that means nothing and will offend or not attract anybody?
Completely. Yeah, it's terrible. The funny, also though, like for those variant covers, they'll still have Superman with the big old American flag because they're trying to sell covers, so they'll still do that. But for as far as what the character means, they'll be like, no, we got to strip that away.
Yeah, I did a video not that long ago about Kurt Swan, the definitive Superman comic book artist, and the kind of the way that he looked at Superman, the way that he saw him, and you could really just see it come out there in the artwork. And I think that's why most Superman artists are inspired by Kurt Swan, because he didn't believe that was outdated. He thought that was important to always be a part of who Superman is front and center.
Yeah, it's evergreen, and it's something that you got to recognize as part of the character, and you can't be ashamed of it or be upset by it. Like, that's the wrong way to go about it.
And then the last claim that you'll hear is that he's really only for kids. He's not a sophisticated character. He's got no edge, or he's just there for nostalgia. He doesn't have a place in modern storytelling because he's too basic. You can't do anything interesting with the character. I would just throw that right out there. Go read Kingdom Come. Go read Red Sun. Go read the Werewolf Saga. There's a lot of stuff you can do with that Superman character, whether he's in the Prime universe or an alternate universe, that are really, really compelling, and they stand the test of time.
Yeah, especially the one that comes to mind for me is Action 775. What's so funny about Truth, Justice, the American Way? That's when you had all these new edgy superheroes coming in that were killing people, and people were like, they're cool. And it's just a whole issue of Superman like flying around Metropolis, and the kids are like dress up as like playing pretend, and the one kid's like, I'm going to be all of like the authority, and they're like, you're made to be Superman. It's like, I don't want to be Superman. He sucks. He can't kill people. I'm just gonna die. Superman sucks. And like, you see how everything's changing, and Superman has to deal with things with these new edgy superheroes, and then in the end he ends up scaring the shit out of Manchester Black, and it's great. That, oh man, it's so good, where he makes him think that he killed his whole team and lobotomized them, and then in actuality he just incapacitated him. He's like, see, I could be as bad as you guys, but it's important not to. He's like, it's important to have dreams and ideals. It's such a good comic, and that, I think, represents a good way about how Superman is, and like how he can adapt to the times, and like how he's always relevant, because that whole story is about what if Superman did change and like become like the modern heroes. But no, he's the same as he always was, and it holds up.
And I think it's so interesting that Alan Moore, of all people, who did more to bring edginess and deconstruction to characters and take it in that more mature direction, maybe those heroes aren't always so good, maybe they're not so aspirational, was also like maybe the world's biggest like aspirational Superman fan. Every time he wrote the character, it was the quintessential golden age freaking Superman.
Yep. And that's there's a couple writers that didn't like Warren Ellis did that too, where like when he wrote the little bit he wrote Superman, where it's like, you know, he's generally more of the darker guy, and then he writes Superman, it's like, oh, there's actually he actually really likes his character. It's pretty cool to see that when you have these guys that are known for the opposite.
Yeah, Grant Morrison do an all-star Superman feels weird, especially if you saw his New 52 Superman. But that's somebody that obviously loves the character and where it came from.
Yeah.
What he represents.
Yeah, because prior, if you wouldn't have read any Alan Moore Superman, but you've read like V for Vendetta, Watchmen, and all that, or like Animal Man, it'd be like, I don't know if I want this guy touching Superman. But then you read it, and he does some incredible stuff. What he did with Mr. Mxyzptlk was really cool too. I like that a lot. But yeah, like when a guy like that has respect for the character, it's crazy to see. But then you have a lot of other modern writers that just can't wrap their head around it.
Well, I think a lot of the more modern writers, they do think of him as an outdated symbol of Americana, and they don't like it, and they want to tarnish it and kind of bring it down. He's not relatable because he's not a cynical character. He doesn't have a whole lot of flaws. What can I do to flaw the character? That's why you get Bendis, and Lois is kind of cheating on him. Loses his son, lets his dad just take him off, even though he thinks he's evil at the time. And it wasn't Superman, and that's why it was rejected.
Yep. That was so Bendis came in, he's like, I'm from Cleveland, and I'm from the home state of Superman. I'm from Ohio, and I'm going to represent what Superman represents. And I know I love classic Superman. We're bringing the trunks back, and then doing all that. It's just such a hack.
Yeah. There's enough cynicism. There's enough darkness in the world. There are enough characters out there doing not the right thing all the time. We need Superman as Superman is supposed to be represented, you know, all the way starting back in the late 30s, all the way today. Today more than ever, we need people to have aspirational heroes, real role models for people to look up to, stories that people can learn from and inspire them to be better citizens, not only in America, but certainly to the entire world. And I think it's more relevant today than ever. Siegel and Schuster created something obviously that was of its time, but it's transcended that. And I hate the arguments like that. They're just so one note, and you can see it's from people that really don't respect the character.
I agree. And you can, something that's cool is if you go back and you read the different decades of Superman, you can see that he changes over time, but he keeps that core of fighting for the oppressed. Like you see that core Superman of doing the right thing, fighting for the oppressed, that stays throughout there, because he adjusts a lot. Like in the beginning, he's issuing death threats, doing a lot of things that you would not expect modern Superman to do. But that core character of who he is stays throughout each decade, and he's always relevant. And we need a character like Superman. And there's enough of those dark heroes to go around. There's not a whole lot of characters like Superman. There's like Superman, Captain America, and not many others. There's not a whole lot of Boy Scouts out there, and you do need your Boy Scouts to keep everyone level. And I think Superman represents truth, justice, and the American way, and you need that now more than ever.
I really hope you enjoyed that conversation about the world's most important superhero, Superman himself. But this is just a portion of a longer conversation. In fact, Dylan and I talked about Superman for over 2 hours in full. If you would like the full rundown, the full conversation podcast about Superman, you do need to go to Think Critical Patreon. There's a link in the video description. There's a button right here. The only place you're going to have awesome conversations about the greatest, most important superhero in the world, Superman. Hope to see you there very, very soon.